Hey everybody, welcome to a parent workshop at Norristown Library, sponsored by Gear Up. Remember to say that this time. I'm Chris Pender, FAMCOM, Families, Communities on the Move. This is what I do. I work with populations from preschool to prison. So I've kind of seen it all, done it all. I'm in every school in Norristown, Roosevelt, Eisenhower, the high school, Stewart, and it's been great. This is the power of change we're talking about. What are you going to see for those of you who attended the first 3 workshops? It all kind of ties together. I've said something in each workshop to bring it together. From how to raise a positive child in a negative world. You know, that was one that was kind of a big hit. People had a lot of questions. We talked about last week was cool because we had some parents and they were asking questions about, you know, some of the topics we had. We were talking about healthy relationships, things of that nature, and how you think, you know, how you carry yourself, and what it meant to be a strong parent. So it was great. So today, this ties right in. This workshop is a little more for parents, though, not so much for the kids. It's for parents, so we can change the way we think. For instance, one of the things I get a lot of time from parents was, that's the way I was parented. You know, it worked for me, so it's going to work for them. And then when you really dig in deep with the parent, it didn't necessarily work for them because they have some of the same bad habits and stuff they did. So as we go through this, I just want you to think about, in your own mindset, if you could change something, what would you change? For instance, last week we got into a conversation about the voices that our kids hear. And a parent shared with us that she wanted to be a doctor. She was all set to be an MD. In high school, she had her colleges picked out. She went to the counselor. The counselor told her she should go into social work because she was never going to make it as a doctor. So she's a social worker. Loves her career, but she has that what if. What if? So if her parents would have been a little stronger, to say, you know, I believe in you. You know, you can do this. You know, what do I need to do to help you get it? She may have been a doctor today. Now, she has no regrets, but in the back of her mind, it's like, what if? And I'm pretty sure if you're a doctor versus a social workers are not bad. There's a significant difference in your life and what you're doing. So as we talk about the power of change, my slogan is do better to be better, because a lot of us talk about being better, but we never want to do better. We say it all the time, but we don't want to put the work in. We talk about it as generational because it is generational. It's ironic that this is the topic because yesterday when I was in high school, one of the questions I asked the kids, you know, if you continue in the route you're on right now with your journey, will you be successful? Most of them said no. But then when I asked them, what would you change? It got difficult because for some reason, we think change is bad. For some reason, we think if somebody asks us to change, we're compromising. We're selling out, and it's not. So as we go to this, I want us to think about it, because as parents, the stuff we do with our kids, you know, it is generational. I got a short video, and then we'll get into this. Hopefully everybody can hear this. Yeah.
We all have 24 hours. All right? What makes some of us average, makes some of us good, some of us great, it's not the family you was born into. Right? It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with your socioeconomic status. It has everything to do with how you command your life. So if you have a bad day, which is no such thing of, it doesn't exist. You had a bad moment, you were so immature that you let that moment dictate the rest of your day. Right? Y'all not kids no more. I don't do elementary school. Right? I don't do elementary school because they really, a fifth grader, if I'm talking to a third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader, kindergartner, I don't care what I tell them, they're not at a place of maturity where they can switch their mindset. They're kids, you're grown. And some of you are grown, but you're still a child. And you brag about how you're an adult. You're only an adult because of your age. You're not an adult because you command your life. You're an adult because of your age. And that's not what makes adulthood. You're not an adult because you are 18 years old, you're 25, 26. If you still kept catching temper tantrum, you still getting attitude, that means you're not an adult in that area. That means that particular area controls you. Right? You almost got into a car accident over with. Car accident been over with 10 hours ago, you still pissed about it. Or you got into it with your friend. That happened 2 days ago and y'all still not talking. That's immaturity. Right? And let me tell you something. You don't know how many days you have. Like, I'm just going to keep it 100. You don't know how many days you have left. You don't want to be wasting days. Like
So that's a powerful statement about wasting days. And again, it's ironic that having this conversation yesterday is that even though everything he said we know is true, we're afraid to change. If you know me, well, my wife knows me in a different way, people say, how you doing? I always say I'm living my best life. There are some people who've never seen me frustrated, never seen me off my game, because that's the one thing we can't control. I can't control what somebody does to me, but I can control how I respond. I can't control what somebody says or how they feel, but I control how I respond. I can control my emotions. So me, when I'm in my car, I get myself straight, I gotta go to work. I can't go and do my job stomping my feet, frowning, moaning, groaning. I have to make sure I'm always on top of my game to the best of my ability. And that's one of the things that I had to change, because he talked about excuses. I'm an inner city kid. Where I came from, you fought. Somebody called your name, you fought. Somebody talked about your mama, you fought. It was just a natural response. Even the way we talked, we use certain words that I can't use because I'm in public, but it became a habit. So one of the things I figured out early was, in order to be successful, I gotta be willing to change. Most of us, that's our problem. We get so stuck on the way we do things that it becomes generational. We don't even know why we're doing it. As parents, my mother did it. Well, that's the way my father did it. We just pass it down. The one thing that is consistent, though, is we get the same results. Somebody told me yesterday, a teacher said, well, change is hard because it's not natural. So my comeback was, that's not true, because we change every year of our lives. We get a year older every year. So we're constantly changing. So it is natural. We just don't want to change things, that we get comfortable with. And that's the problem. So as we go through this, I really want to take a look at it and think about it. What are some things we can change? Webster defines change as to make someone or something different, alter or modify, replace something with something else, especially something of the same kind that is newer or better. Substitute one thing or another. So change is a good thing. Change is a very good thing, man. It's not bad. Change is not compromise. Change simply says, I'm assessing myself to get where I need to get to. What do I need to do differently? How can I be better? And that's where we have to look at change. Not saying that, man, I'm compromising, as young people say, I'm selling out. To achieve a long-term sustainable goal, I choose the word sustainable for a reason, because I think a lot of times we do things and we don't understand it's going to be sustainable. For instance, if I continue the same bad behavior and I decide to correct it in one class, eventually it's going to come back out again. And that happens to a lot of us. It's like people who smoke. And okay, I'm gonna stop smoking because you guys don't smoke. But sooner or later, I gotta run outside, I gotta get a cigarette and not smoke, because the change in them wasn't sustainable. A lot of young people I talk to, they don't understand that, change is not just adapting your behavior when you're around people who are in control. Change is being changed throughout, which means the way I act at home, I should act at school. So as parents, we gotta lead by example. And we talked about in the last class, I can't be cussing at my child all the time, expect my child not to curse. I can't be having conversations with people about how bad teachers are and expect my child to go to school and pay attention to the teacher. So a lot of times we got to change the way we think. What we think is acceptable is not acceptable. We also have to change because kids are different now. When a lot of us were growing up, social media wasn't existent. Our parents or people we came in contact with, they were the number one influencers in our life. Now you can get a job and be an influencer. And people will follow an influencer without even checking the background. So we have to change the way we do things. We got to be more savvy as parents, and we got to be more involved. Anything and anyone who fails to change in their environment eventually becomes stagnant, irrelevant, or disconnected. And I see it a lot when I sit down and talk to parents, and even some teachers, because I've been teaching this way for 40 years. I had this conversation last week. For 40 years, I've been teaching this way. So I asked them, well, what's different? The kids are different. Are the kids really different? Or is our failure to change our methods to reach a different generation of kids is what's making it different? I can't do the same thing I did 40 years ago. I can't go to the store with $1 and buy what I bought 40 years ago. It's just not gonna happen. That brand new car that I had 40 years ago is probably considered antique now. So everything is changing around us, but yet we still try to do things the same way. We fail to recognize, that change is good. And the reason why we change is because our environment is changing. And it's no different as a parent. The way my parent parented me, I can't parent my kids. I can't parent my grandson. The way when I'm in school interacting with kids, I can't do what I did or somebody did with me 20 years ago and have it like a dictatorship. I got to make sure kids are involved now. I got to make sure they have a voice or they don't come, because kids talk with their feet. That's just the bottom line. If I don't like it, I'm not coming back. And unfortunately, they grow into adults who talk with their feet. I don't like my job, I'm not coming back. I'm gonna come to work late. I'll fix you, I'm not coming in tomorrow. So we have to make sure that we change, that we are constantly changing. We're constantly trying to get better at what we do. Your ability to change will ultimately determine your success in every area of your life. I don't care what it is. If you're married in a relationship, if you don't change, the relationship is going to strain. It's not going to grow. And if it's not growing, you got a problem. Because if it's not growing, it gets stagnant. We talked about it, people become disconnected. If you start a business, you got to change your business to stay with the times. Like, if I'm selling newspapers, I can't still sell newspapers today and think I'm going to make the money I was making 20 years ago because people don't do it. So I got to change. For instance, I can't go in the classroom and just lecture for 30, 40 minutes. If I know I'm going to be that long, I got to bring some visuals down. You know, that's like me walking in the classroom and start talking about albums and VCHs and you know, they look at me like I'm crazy because like I'm speaking a different language. So we have to change, because when we change is how we can become successful. How we view our relationships, we got to look at it differently now. You know, we got to put more work in now, because now there's so many distractions. We talked about it in How to Raise a Positive Child in a Negative World. We're competing with our kids because of social media. For every 3 things you're telling your child, they're spending 6 hours on social media hearing something totally different. You know, so we have to make sure, man, that we're changing the way we approach stuff. You know, and the C for change is to create a new mindset. We got to be aware of thinking, stinking thinking. Stinking thinking is that thinking, man, that doesn't allow us to grow. Stinking thinking is that thinking, man, that's polluted with false information. A lot of times as parents, we'll base what's happening with our child with our experiences. Because when I was a child, I couldn't do this. Because when I was a child, I wasn't allowed to do this. You know, it's like when I said I wanted to do this for a living, people said it's not even a job, because they couldn't see it. They couldn't fathom it because it never happened before. It's like if I'm talking to a group of people and I say, hey, I've been married for going on 39 years, they can't fathom it because they never saw it before. So we got to create a new mindset the way we think. You know, we have to be learners. You know, we have to be negotiators. You know, more than anything else, man, we got to be tacticians. You know, I think too many times when I know we'll have kids and we think they're kind of going to parent themselves. You know, or I talk about teachers. I'm teaching a class and I think if I just get up there, every kid is going to get this lesson, you know, because I put in a board or smart board. That's not how it is. So we got to get rid of the stinking thinking, man. We got to start thinking about, you know, how can I move ahead? How can I be better? And we got to challenge ourselves. When we allow stinking thinking to pollute or contaminate our thinking, we produce a self-inflicted false sense of identity, and we do. Because sometimes we hold on to what we think so hard that it becomes who we are. It defines us. And I'll put my flag in the ground, I'm not changing, because now I think somebody's attacking me. And they're not attacking me. They're just saying, hey, you know, you could do this differently. There's a better way to do this. Instead of, why are you questioning me? Why are you questioning my authority? You know, you're not being polite, you know, or you're being disrespectful. No, there's just another way that we can do this. You know, I have 3 children and I have to parent up. They're grown now. They were all totally different. The personalities are different, the way I approached them was different, and there's no different as parents, you know, when we, in the real world outside the house, people are different. It's like a rainbow. All these different colors come together. How do I negotiate it? So as we go to this, we got to make sure, man, that we understand, man, that we're not stuck in, you know, little rituals that becomes our identity. Don't convince yourself that who you are is what you were created to be. This is one of my favorite statements, because I think sometimes we get so caught up in our circumstances and we say that's who we are, and it's not. One thing I say to the kids, and I say it to the kids in summer school, you know, this is just a temporary set of circumstances you're in because you made a bad decision. This is not who you are. You're not dumb, you're not stupid. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't learn. It may mean you need to learn differently, but more importantly, you have to change the way you think. You know, I cannot go to class and then think I'm going to pass. You know, as parents, we cannot parent our kids and think our kids are going to grow up okay. We can't allow social media and any type of media to influence our kids. You know, the class before last, a young lady sat right there. She said the same thing. She said, as a grown woman, she said, you know, I had to get off of social media because I'm on social media and I'm listening to all my friends and I was feeling bad about myself. This is a grown woman, this is professional. She was saying, I was feeling bad about myself. She says because she's divorced, she's a single parent, her friends are married, and they're talking about this great life they have. The husband did this, the husband did this, the husband did that. So now imagine a kid whose brain is not fully developed yet, who's still trying to figure out who they are, what their identity are. You know, We got to change. We got to understand, man, that decisions we make do not determine who we are. And we got to make sure we share that with our kids. Too many times as parents, though, we kind of stuck in that mindset. We made a mistake or we made a bad decision, and we allow it to determine who we are. And I just had a conversation with somebody. We were talking about how some parents are intimidated by teachers because of that. Because maybe I didn't do well in this subject, so I need to go up and advocate for my child, but I'm afraid to because it's a math teacher and I sucked in math. So I'm just not going to say anything. Or maybe I don't speak English well, so I'm not going to go up there and challenge this teacher. So we just kind of sit back and we allow things to happen to our kids that they really shouldn't have to go through or are capable of dealing with. My dad used to always say, either rise to the occasion or shrink to your circumstances. And he was right. I would go to him and I would complain about something. He says, you got two choices. You either rise to the occasion or shrink to your circumstances. One is going to be a victory, one is going to be a loss. So if you shrink to your circumstances, that means you allow your circumstances to win. They dominate you. Now you become a victim. Because every time something happens, you go to this. That's your go-to. This happened to me. I love one thing he said in the video. He said, you got to stop complaining about something that happened 40 years ago. At some point, you got to take responsibility for yourself. At some point, you got to say, I'm going to be different. So we got to make sure, man, that we're thinking about this thing called change and we're working at it. Don't allow the world to define you. And this is for you and your kids. You got to make sure you're telling your children. This was a heavy discussion last week, about how the world defines our kids. The world tells our kids how to dress, what vocabulary is appropriate, how you should address your parents. They have all this stuff you can get on social media. The problem is there's no voice combating it. So they're being filled with this stuff. I give you the perfect example. I used to do a workshop in the halfway house. My wife used to go with me, and there were some beautiful women in the halfway house. They were all in there because they were abused, but they believed they were ugly because somebody just pounded that into their head over a long period of time. So they begin to believe it. That's the power of belief. I'll give you another example. You ever see an elephant chained to a stake in a circus? We all know an elephant can break that any time. But what they do is, when an elephant is a cub, they put that chain on him. And as a cub, he can't break it. So he just walks round and round and round. So when he gets older, in his mind, he sees the chain. I can't break the chain. I'll give you another example. You try to take a chair and a whip and stop a lion in the jungle. It's just not going to happen. But you see it in the zoo when you see it in the circus, because from the time that lion's a cub, he's taught to respect the chair and respect the whip. It's the same thing with our kids. Our kids will learn this stuff over a period of time, man. So by the time they become adults, it's already in there. They've been trained. And in school, we talked about the 3 parts about it, how family, school, and community play a large role, in raising our kids as far as being negative and positive, because those 3 areas influence our kids a lot. So sometimes we send our kids to school thinking that, they're in this safe haven and they're getting some bad information in school. So we got to make sure, man, that this how we understand how important the power of change is. And the H is be honest. You got to be honest with yourself. I think one of the things that I found that make parents effective, it's not about how much they love their kid, how much money they can spend, it's being honest with yourself. For instance, are you leading by example? Are you asking your kids to do something that you're not doing? Like I always get on guys, you don't go to back to school night, but you're always telling your son or daughter how important education is. You don't go to back to school night, but you don't miss a football game. You're not going to miss a sporting event, but you're telling your child education is so important. Monday night football, you staying home. You don't go to back to school night. So we're sending mixed messages. So you got to be honest with yourself. What are some things that I got to work on? What are some things that I need to change? Because my kid is mimicking me. Because I say this all the time, more people watch you than listen to you. I don't care who you are. More people watch you than listen to you. I think it's important that we understand it as parents. So we got to make sure that we're honest with ourselves. What you feed will ultimately grow stronger. I used the analogy in the last class and everybody laughed. You tell your kids don't lie, but when somebody calls you and want to talk to you, you tell them I'm not home. You do. It's just forced. I think everybody does that generation. But you're teaching your kid how to lie. You walk around the supermarket eating stuff, not paying for it, well, you're stealing. So what I'm saying is whatever you feed grows stronger. If you continue to do those things in front of your children, it becomes a habit for them. Because the average child, until something happens, they almost idolize their parents. No child at an early age thinks their parents are bad. So they mimic them, they idolize them. So it's important that we understand, those things we feed are going to grow stronger. I've been in the room with people where I'm sitting down meeting and the kid is in trouble for cursing, and the mom comes in and sits down, and after 2 minutes I know exactly where it came from. I don't know where the blankety blank got it from. And I'm saying, okay, now we all know where they got it from. But the parent doesn't even realize that this is what they did. So you keep feeding this. And what I mean by feeding it, you cannot watch stuff that continuously uses bad language, negative things, and you're sitting there watching with your kids and think you're gonna have this positive child now. You gotta change that. Your child sees how you treat your significant other. Your child sees how you treat him and other people. Your child's in the back seat when you cursing people out when you're driving down the car. Your kids see this. When you're in your car talking about somebody you work with like a dog, your kid is riding right there in the back seat hearing all this. How many times I've heard a kid say when the mom or dad would say to the son, well, why are you being disrespectful? And the little kid would say, well, you said the teacher was stupid. Because they're having these conversations and you're laughing, but it's true. You have these conversations in front of your kids. So your kids are picking up. So we got to change that. We got to make sure we're doing the right stuff. We got to make sure that we're leading by example. If you feed your mind negative images and things contrary to who you are, working towards becoming, you will be engaged in a battle against yourself. A lot of our kids are fighting themselves, man. I was just sharing with Nan, I talk to these kids in summer school, and I'm so impressed with them. But they fighting themselves. Because why should I go to school? Nobody's working with them in that process. Some of it's generational. My father didn't go to school. He turned out all right. I got uncles who didn't go to school. They tell, but now what's your definition of all right? And we're going to talk about it later. If you think being mediocre is all right, that's okay. But I don't know anybody that wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be mediocre. That's not the goal, and it shouldn't be the goal. But if you've settled for mediocrity, why wouldn't your kids? If you're not setting goals in front of your kids, why are your kids going to set goals? We had a mom the first week who said that her kids were struggling in school. And she's in college getting her bachelor's now, the family that was sitting over there. So she said her kids are saying, I want to go to college because you did it. You worked a full-time job. I can do it. We lead by example. And I'm not saying go to college, but what examples are we leading for setting goals? Are we doing the things we need to do to help them feed their mind? They coming home, we just let them look at TV all day long. What are we allowing them to look at on TV? Some of the stuff on TV, our kids really shouldn't be looking at because it's shaping their minds. You got to look at it this way. Our minds are like little computers. And wherever we look, we're constantly taking pictures. I say it all the time. It's like you'll smell something when you're 10, and at 20, you'll be somewhere and you smell the same thing, you automatically think about it. How many of us know songs that was probably 10 years ago and you haven't thought about it, but soon that beat comes on, you hear it. Why do you think when you go shopping, marketing people know it, we don't. Why do you think when you go shopping, they play certain types of music? You go into a sneaker store, all you hear is rap music, because the kids are bouncing around spending their money. All the girls got on tight black clothes and spending their money. Now, if you go into Macy's or somewhere, you're not hearing it because it's a different crowd. They're playing to the crowd. And again, you walk around singing and shopping and spending your money. We laugh, but elevator music is like that for a reason because they want you calm on the elevator. They don't want you dancing and jumping on the elevator. So they play, which I think is the worst music in the world, but they play this slow music because they calm. So see, what we feed does grow stronger. And societies learn how to change our mindsets. We just haven't learned. Commercials are geared to make you buy stuff you don't need. QVC's largest profit margin is at night. And I say this a lot because when people come home, late night TV, you're bored, you got nothing to do, you're looking at TV, you're buying stuff you don't even need. Because they know you're more susceptible that time of night because you're tired. So we have to understand, man, that just as people are competing for us for our dollars, they're competing for our kids. They're competing for our kids. So we got to make sure we understand that. Be careful what you allow into your mind and life. I say that all the time, man. I'm very careful about what I look at, what I listen to, because it does matter. If you're trying to think positive, you can't look at negative stuff all day long because that's going to be your mindset. You can't. He talked about not having a bad day. Most of us have bad days because of what we put in our heads. We look at negative stuff all day long. So now I got this negative stuff on my head. And soon I get to school, my first negative encounter, that's how I started my day. That's all I know. That sets the tone for the day. I've had kids come tell me why they get in trouble in the morning because they say, I've been arguing with my mom all morning long. So I come out the house, I go right to school. And what do I do when I get to school? Now the teacher's fussing at me. So I'm already in combat mode. So that sets the tone for the day. You know, I've met teachers who first thing in the morning, they sour. So I already imagine what's going to happen when the kid walks into the classroom and is not doing what they're supposed to do. They ready to go. So it does matter what we put into our minds. And this is interactive. You got a question or comment anytime, you can just jump right in here. Yes.
My name is Latricia.
Right on cue.
My daughter goes to Norristown High.
Oh.
My question is, how do you censor them when it comes to like the phone after 9? So I have 3 teenagers, and I do say to them after 9, leave the phone downstairs, go upstairs to your bedroom. But I've heard of, not in Pennsylvania, I think in New York, where a parent took the phone away because it was after 9, and that's the rule. And the parent got in trouble for taking the phone away.
By who?
I think the child called, what do you call it?
Child Protection
Yes,
Service.
or something like that. And they came to the house at night. I think they arrested the parent. I'm not 100% sure. But it's in New York, not in PA. I don't know if that's happening in PA, but how do you approach the kids, in regards to, you don't want you to have the phone after 9, pick it up back 6 o'clock when you're up, how do
I say this all the time.
I'm doing it already. It's fine.
I say this all the time. You buy shoes, right? You got a shoe box, right?
Yeah.
Put them in that shoe box. 9:05, they go in the shoe box. They can get the shoe box back from you in the morning. You can charge them up. I say this to parents all the time. If they can't be responsible, and tell them, if you can't be responsible to monitor the phone, you're gonna have to do it for them.
But I mean, I'm a parent.
Yeah.
In my late 30s, and I find myself having a hard time with the phone. I literally have to leave
Oh, I know.
way downstairs.
Yeah.
Because I'm on social media, I'm like, okay, 1 hour is enough. You had a long day, 1 hour. And 1 hour turns to 2 hours. And 2 hours, I'm like, wait a second, how am I gonna get up in the morning? And I'm the adult.
Put your phone with their phone. Let them see you put your phone with their phone.
I'm trying.
Put them all together. No, I mean, put them all together. But you know what? I think is great because you can have that and I think sometimes as parents, we're afraid to have those honest conversations.
Yeah.
Let them know you're struggling with it too. Let them know it's a sacrifice for you too. It's okay to have that conversation. However, you do understand the benefits of doing what you're doing, and you're trying to help them understand the benefits. So one of the things I say across the board, I think we don't communicate enough with our kids. We don't. You can't expect your child to act like an adult and you treat them like a kid forever. It's just not gonna happen. At some point, you gotta treat them like an adult. At some point, they're cracking up over here, they're like, yeah. At some point, you gotta have a conversation like, hey, this is what adults do. Sometimes we have to do things that we don't want to do to be successful. That's just, I think every adult in this room would say that. I want to be successful. I got to do some things I don't want to do. So that means I got to put my phone down. That means I got to, maybe just all your phones may need to go in the shoebox at the same time. Now you can't go sneak back and get yours. You got to make sure you self too. But it's all designed to be addictive. It is. It's designed to be addictive. It is. And I'm going to tell you how bad it is. I've been in the classroom and teachers teaching and they in the back of the class, man, everybody got their phone out. And I hire people and I supervise people, I train people. I got to always say 3 or 4 times, make sure you put your phone away. Make sure you turn your phone off, because there's people who will start texting or whatever in the middle. I've been doing a workshop and I had to correct somebody because they answered the phone in the front row. So I stopped it. No, I wasn't telling them. No, they answered the phone. They were like, hello. And I'm like, wait a minute, dude, right? But it's something you can go through together. I think sometimes we feel like I got to be the hammer all the time. That's the chance to lead by example.
Yeah. I'm doing that with them, but my question is you're saying they're after your kids in regards to getting them on social media.
Of course they are.
That
Yeah.
content. How do other parents deal with that? I'm doing that, what I just said. I'm doing that, leaving the phone downstairs with my kid's phone or whatever. But how do other parents deal with that?
We talked about this last week. And I'll give you 2 things. One, I think we got to be careful not to compare ourselves to other parents, because we don't get to see the whole picture. We only get to see this small snippet. Like, I've had people tell me who I know say things that I know is not true. They want you to believe that everything is perfect, but it's not. I think the second thing is it's going to be different in every house because your kids are different. Like the way I approach my kids, I can't approach somebody else's kids. Whether it was my nieces or nephews, I couldn't. It's different. You know, even dealing with kids in school, I got to deal with them different, separately, because they are different. And I think we forget that kids are unique. And if you had an identical twin, your DNA and fingerprints would be different. I think sometimes as parents, we just lump all kids into a category, or as we talked about earlier, we use our past because I did this, so we think they're going to do it. You know, maybe I couldn't be trusted, so I'm not going to trust them. Like you said, maybe because I'm addicted to the phone. You know, so that's why the conversation is important. They had the conversations, and you got to find the boundaries and guidelines for your house. Now, the other thing is you got to make sure you have expectations for them. You know, a lot of times we assume kids just know you got to tell them what the expectations. My expectation is that 901, this phone is off. If your phone is not off at 901, these are going to be the consequences. That has to be in part of the conversation.
Yeah, but what if the parents are getting in trouble for like taking the phone away?
Well, let me tell you something. For me, if that was me, they're going to take my kid and the phone. Because if I'm paying a phone bill, you're paying, and I don't even know. I mean, that's crazy. So I wouldn't worry about that. There had to be more to it than something. Yeah, there had to be more to it than just a phone. The child must have said they were being abused or something, because that's not abuse, taking away somebody's cell phone. Yeah, yeah,
maybe it's good
yeah.
custody and the other parent gave them the phone or something
Yeah.
otherwise.
So I mean, I wouldn't even, if you're not physically, you know, abusing your child, if you're not neglecting your child, I wouldn't even worry about that. I wouldn't. Because I think, you know, or I would, tell the kids, like, you think this is bad? Wait till you get in the system. If you think going to the system, being DHS or in a foster home is better, it's not. If the worst thing that happens to your child is somebody, losing their phone at 9 o'clock, they're going to live a pretty good life. They have a pretty good life, man. So I think, and you may want to have a conversation that things cost. A lot of kids don't realize that. They just think they're going to grow up. When my kids were little, they used to always say, go to the Mac machine. They don't call them Mac machines anymore, because they never understood that you got to put money in for money to come out. See, they don't get that concept. So maybe that's a conversation you got to have. But this goes back to what I was talking about, how we got to be willing to change how we're doing things. We can't just get on something and stick to it, especially if we know it's not working. We got to change it. And be flexible, because you may start out by saying, I tell you what, I'm gonna let you stay on your phone, but I know I have your phone, but if I catch you on your phone, this is what's gonna happen. And then you get the phone and put them in a shoebox. But because that way I'm telling you, I'm letting you know what it is. We can't, like my father parented with an iron fist. That was just it. There was no conversations. If I said but, I was talking back. That's just the way it was. On the same token, I was talking to somebody in camp yesterday because this little kid was acting up, and I was panicking because the mom was talking about, I'm going to beat you, and I'm like, oh man, we about to get in trouble here, And then after they left, we calmed them down. We were laughing because our parents, we could have got that. My father, wherever you embarrass me at, I'm going to embarrass you at. That was the way old school parents did it. So we got to change. So be flexible, but yeah, you need to have those conversations with them. I think the minute you are afraid to impose expectations and rules, you're just giving up your power. You're giving up your power. So we got to make sure, hopefully I answered your question. Take time to discover who you really are. I say it to parents all the time, and I use the same analogy. It's like when you get on the airplane, the mask comes down, and they tell you to put your mask on first. Because if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else. You got to discover who you are. A lot of times we have parents who don't know who they are, trying to shape and mold kids. And it's tough to do. It's tough to do. They need to see you reading books. They need to see you looking at positive stuff on TV. They need to hear positive stuff, positive affirmations coming out of your mouth. You can make it. You can be somebody. You can do this. You can do that. Just because you get a C doesn't mean you're stupid. You failed a test, that's just one test. Too many times we get into that mindset, somebody fails a test and we start calling them. We had a young lady last week who said it. You fail a test, they start calling you lazy, you didn't put the effort out, instead of saying, well, do you understand the subject? Just the way you phrase stuff. So that's what I mean, we got to change the way we think, because a lot of times people in authority say the same thing. You didn't study, you came unprepared, you just not smart or whatever, this is not the right class for you, when maybe the person's just not grasping. I was in a class early in the year, not here in the city, and there was a kid that nobody knew didn't speak English. I don't even know how that's possible. But nobody knew the kid didn't speak English. Until finally somebody said, well, you know he don't speak English. And he sat in class every day. And the teacher just assumed that he just wasn't doing his work. So that happens a lot, though. You'd be surprised how that happens a lot. So make sure you take time to discover who you are, because I keep saying that you're leading by example. And the A is be aware. Be aware of how your decisions and choices you make impact others. It can be generational. We do. We have to be careful of how, the choices we make. You know, how we conduct ourselves. You know, how we spend our money, how we spend our time, how we interact with teachers. You know, how I respond with my anger, how I respond to my frustration. You know, because your kids are watching, your kids are learning. They're picking up those habits. You know, so it may mean you may have to change some things. You know, when you're by yourself, you don't have kids, maybe you break stuff when you're angry, maybe you curse, maybe you do a lot of different things. But when you have kids, they got to change. It has to change. So we really have to start looking at that, man. Are we aware of how the decisions I make, the things I say, impact? You know, sometimes as parents, we use words like, you always. It's not always, but we say stuff like that. Or, you make me. You know, you make me angry. So the kid grows up thinking like, yo, it's me, not what I did. It's me that's making you angry. It's me that's making you frustrated. You know, you get on my last nerve. We say stuff like that, especially to little kids. I work with parents, single parents, and I'm always getting on females for saying, because they'll say this, you look just like your father was no good. You can't say that to a little kid, because the kid growing up thinking, yeah, that's the same face. I hear that. So, and I hear guys say that, in all defense, guys will say the same thing. You look just like your mother and you act just like your mother. We got to make sure, man, that we're changing the way we think, man, and what comes out our mouth. Because what we say, you can apologize for everything, but you can't take stuff back. And I think a lot of times we think we can as parents. Any questions, comments as I go forward? Any young people want to share? Because you're nodding your head like, you sure? You look like something was ready to come out, and then you kind of like held it back. All right. We got to understand as parents, man, that we're the compass and the early blueprint for morality, integrity, character, health, relationships, and work ethics for our kids. We are. We set that compass. I know we all think the school is supposed to do it. Some of us are supposed to do it, but they're learning that at home. You know, we got to help our kids understand, you know, what it is to be a person of integrity. What does it mean to be a person of character? You know, we got to teach our kids about morality, what it means to be moral. You know, when I work with workshops for young ladies, a lot of young ladies don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. They have no idea. There's a lot of guys who don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. And they should be learning at home because, again, they learn on social media. And social media has a lot of stuff that's only there to entertain. It's not telling you the real story. So guys grow up thinking I can hit women, grope women, whatever, and that's okay. Girls grow up thinking like that's okay for somebody to do it because he loves me or whatever. We got to teach that stuff at home. You know, we have to teach our young ladies that they have value. You know, and your value is not determined by what you do for somebody. You know, we got to teach our young men the same thing. So we have to change our mindset, because those days of thinking your kid is going to walk out the door in school and everything is going to be great, it's not. Because just like you talked about other parents, unfortunately, there's other parents who are not teaching their kids that. And I don't care where you live at, where you work at, you know, your kids will have to interact with other kids. It's just a fact of life. And see, the thing about life is, I say this all the time, life does not respect color. It doesn't respect race. It doesn't respect economics, demographic. You know, life hits all of us. It does. It's something that's just unavoidable. If you don't take the time or make the effort to deposit good things into yourself and to your children, somebody else will. That's just a fact. That is just a fact, man. And this is the part you gotta understand. It could be somebody that's close to you. I wasted so much money trying to figure out what leadership was. And I went to California, Rick Warren, Fred Price, all these people I saw, John Maxwell, read all these books, and it dawned on me, leadership is simply influence. Whoever has the most influence is the leader. It's not about the title. It's not about how much money they make. Whoever has the most influence. So whoever has the most influence over your child is who's leading your child. That's just the reality. Why do you think people are becoming influencers now? People are making livings off influencing people. Because they know if I get on social media enough and I wear a certain skirt and I make it look cool and I get all these likes, somebody's going to see it. Mom, you got to buy me that skirt. Mom, you got to buy me those sneakers. You know, Mom, you got to buy me this, buy me this, buy me this, because they see it. It's no different when you walk in a supermarket and there's no rhyme or reason. The chocolate chip cookies are right there in the front and all the rest of the cookies in the back. It's designed to get your kid to say, Mom, get those chocolate chip cookies, and you buy the chocolate chip cookies. Because if you don't, you know he's going to wander all the way around the store till you get back. So everything is set up like that. We just don't know it. And we have not adapted to what the world is doing. So we got to make sure, man, that we understand, man, that, you know, that we invest in positive stuff in our kids. We're telling them what's right, what's wrong. We're telling them what's good and what's not good. We're telling them what the healthy relationship looks like. You know, we're leading by example. You know, we're turning that TV off. We're having conversations with our kids. You know, like, I know this sounds like 1950s stuff, but sit at the table and have dinner and have conversations. You know, when your kid comes home, we talked about that last week, ask them how was your day today? What did you do today? You know, ask them, how you doing? How you really doing? You know, sometimes, you know, we get so busy and we got to change this. When I'll say, how you doing? I really don't want to hear it. I just ask you because it's the right thing I'm supposed to say. I'm on to the next thing before you say anything. How many times we've done it to our kids? Hey, you had a good day today? Oh, I'm glad. And you go right on moving.
I think I changed it to,
Yeah.
instead of saying, how was school today, I start asking them, how were you in school today?
Cool. Right.
They're like, Mom.
No, but that's cool. But now, do you really listen to the answer? Because a lot of times,
Talk.
yeah, cool. Because a lot of times we move on to the next thing. Or I can't stop looking at TV. So I'm really, I had this conversation with men a lot. Men, believe it or not, you know, we're good listeners. We just don't hear. We're listening to every word that comes out your mouth. We do. We're listening to every word that comes out your mouth. We're just not hearing you. There's a difference. There's a difference. I can listen to the words come out your mouth all day long. But am I really hearing what you're saying to me? That's the difference. So people say, I'm listening, but you're not. It's almost like you're looking at TV and somebody's talking to you. You're hearing the words, but you're not missing a thing in this TV show. You got this thing down pat. You know, hey, put it this way. The perfect example was you got your earbuds in and somebody's trying to talk to you. You watching the mouth move, but you're not really hearing what's coming out. A lot of us, we do that. I'm listening, but I'm not really hearing what somebody's saying.
How do you get them to hear?
No, I'm talking about parents. What I'm saying, sometimes you got to disengage with everything else and engage in the person you're talking to. Sometimes you got to say, hey, when you ask them that question, you look them in the eye and you have a conversation. You have to engage people. You know, you got to challenge them. Hey, this is the time frame, no electronics. For 30 minutes, we're going to do without electronics. I tell parents, you need to do that. You know, and have real conversations with them. Just don't talk to them the only time when they do stuff wrong. You know, have conversations around different things. Hey, you did a really nice job there. Hey, I'm proud of you when you did that. You know, that was okay. You know what, we'll do better next time. You know, just don't ask them how they doing Monday through Friday. Do it on Saturday and Sunday. Just don't make it about school. You know, how are you doing? You know, how you really doing? You know, those are the questions we got to ask and we got to dig deep. You know, suicide the rate is going up in every category. From young people, males, it's just going through the roof. And I say this to myself all the time. I wonder how many people who we pass every day, who you say, how you doing? And they really not doing well. But we never really dig a little deeper. You know, how many times have somebody said, you're a kid that says, I don't understand. And you're not hearing them say they don't understand the subject. You just hear out you, what you mean you don't understand? Well, if I don't understand, you ask me what you mean I don't understand. Doesn't make it any clearer. I still don't understand. But we just fly right past that. So that's what I'm on. We listened for it, but we didn't really hear it. Or how many times the kids come home and say, Mom, I'm struggling this subject. I'm struggling this subject. I can't get it. And you're okay. And then they bring home a D, we're ballistic. Meanwhile, I've told you every day I come home, Mom, I'm not having it. You know, sometimes I may be wrong for what I'm saying. The teacher don't like me, whatever, but I'm telling you that I'm not doing well in this class. And we just don't hear it. Work harder. You know, get help. But do we say, okay, let me help you get help. Let me help you get it to, hey, maybe I can talk to your teacher. We can figure something out. You know, we got to change that approach. Somebody asked me last week, well, wouldn't that be too aggressive as a parent? No, it just means you're a caring parent. I think you would much rather be aggressive with your kids and them learning and being educated and being good people than sitting back being a spectator and now you got to go visit them in jail. Now you got all these other social issues you got to deal with because you were nice. You got to find a balance. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Well, it just dawned on me, like I said, I'm in my late 30s, and with my teenagers now, when they're saying that they need help or they're struggling with the subject, I do reach out to the teachers or try to get them tutored. But behind their backs, I'm talking to my husband like, are you serious? At this age, I had to figure it out myself. I have to go to the library, sign up for tutoring, call my parents, tell them I'm staying late at school, and study and figure it out. Like, how are they telling me, Mom, I'm struggling with this and I'm struggling with that? But I do make the effort to do what I have to do, what I didn't get at that age.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Did you raise your kids the same exact way you were raised, or did you try to give them more?
I give them more.
So now you know why they're not like you. No, I had this conversation with my friends. My neighbor, good neighbor of mine, he passed away. We used to have this conversation all the time. Sometimes in our quest to make sure our kids have it better than we have it, we spoil them. We make it easy for them. Then we expect them to do like we were, and no, we had to go through some real things. And sometimes it's like my father walked uphill to go everywhere he went. And as I got older, I realized that was impossible. It's totally, but when I was a kid, I was like, man, he really had, he walked, and it rained everywhere he went. That's all I heard. Rain on this side of the street, down that side of the street. He walked uphill to school, walked uphill. When you're a kid, you think that's cool. As an adult, like, that's impossible. So you take those stories and you try to make it easier for your kids, so they're not built the way we were built. That's just the reality of it all. But you expect them to be as strong as you were when you took some of that away. And that's not a bad thing. So you gotta find a balance. Like you say, the library, man, they had they don't have even card catalogs anymore. Most of these kids don't even know what that is. They don't know about, I gotta go to the library and I gotta look in the card catalog, I gotta find a book, pull out research. I can turn my phone on and say, hey. And then if I get real serious, hey Siri. I ain't gotta put it in. So it's a different world. So I hear you. But we're in a different world now. It's just different.
Like I said, I talked to my husband about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Even the driving thing, like.
I think every parent does that.
16 going on 17, and I'm like to my husband, oh my God, by the time I'm 16, I have my driver's license. By the time I'm 14, I have my permit. I tell her, come on, do the permit. And she's like, Mom, I'd rather just sit in the back seat.
Because you take it. I was just about to say that. If you take it everywhere, and I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying, look, I try to get my wife to drive. I want to sit in the passenger seat. I say that all the time, man. I see other women drive like, yo, why I'm not sitting over there like them? So she said she got to come back now. Go ahead.
I don't know, like, give me some time, Don't shove it down my throat, because that's gonna make me not want to do it even more.
See, you're hearing from a teenager perspective.
Yeah, but like, if she gets her license that early in life, why do
See?
I have to? That's what I feel.
You're hearing from a teenager's perspective.
Yeah, but my daughter, she's constantly on the move. So at that age, I was constantly on the move too. And because of that, I was like, oh no, I need to get my permit. I need to get my license. So my daughter is doing stuff like how active I was at that age. But she's like, Mom, why do I need a driver's license? I'll just sit in the back seat or the passenger and you drive.
Okay. I'm pretty sure, though, you were probably a lot more independent at that age than they were.
Yes.
So that's the difference. It's like when I grew up, I had to do certain things. I didn't have a choice. So either I walked or I took public transportation. There was no Uber. There was no other option. And if my father had to work, my mom didn't drive, I was hoofing it. or I caught the bus. So, but now they got options, and we fed those options. Whatever you feed grows stronger. We fed them. We take them door to door.
I had options too,
Yeah.
but I told my parents, no, let me do this. Like, I think for high school, they were like, let me take you to school. And I was like, absolutely not. I will find how to get to school. You're not going to take me to school.
But why? Okay, what was driving that though? Was it because you're independent, or you didn't want your friends to see them dropping you off?
I'm sorry?
Was it because you were independent, or you didn't want to see your friends dropping, your parents dropping you off?
Number one, I don't want my friends to see
See,
my parents.
so
dropping
you
me
were motivated. These kids ain't motivated. They like, yo, drop me off. take me to the front, right? They like, take me to the front of the school. Get out and open the door for me. This is a different generation. They're not. They don't care. Hey, you walk me to the front door. Give me lunch money in front of everybody. This is different. This is different. And I think this is what I meant, how we have to change, because times are different. And part of it is our fault. I know with my own kids, I spoiled them. I made stuff easy for them. I did. My daughter probably missed the school bus her whole senior year on purpose, because she knew my schedule was different, so I would drop off at school. They both played basketball. I don't think, how many times they catch the late bus? Maybe a half dozen, because they knew dad was going to swing by, pick them up on the way home. And they would have friends waiting. The bus be pulling off, and they be there with 4 day friends like that. You take us all home. So I mean, and my father, it wasn't happening. Matter of fact, my father said, yo, boy, you better be home by a certain time. So it's different. So we have to change. And some of the things we've kind of, and it's not a bad thing, because with each generation, it should get better. And it should be like that. But we can't make it better for them, but then try to hold them to the same standard. And that's what I mean. That's up to you. You got to answer that question. That's not my question. But I can tell you this. We've had those conversations. My kids were prepared for the world. What I learned from my kids was, especially the later years in college, you'd be surprised what they learned. You'd be surprised what they figured out that they just didn't say to you. You'd be amazed. I guarantee you, those two young ladies right there's a lot of stuff in their heads they just never said to their parents that they know. Like my kids, when they got in college, when they graduated, they're like, man, I wish I was still in college, because now they got to work, they got to pay for stuff. So they heard you the stuff they said, or they would all tell me, I'm glad you made me go to college. They weren't saying it during the time. So you'd be surprised. But and I got to say this, it's our job to give them information. We can't make them take it. Just like the young lady with the driver's license. We can't. We can give them information, and we can say, hey, I really wish you would do this because of this. At the end of the day, she has to make the decision. Because if she doesn't want to do it, she'd probably take the test and fail. I'm not saying do that. So that's not what I'm saying. But so that's the part we got to look at and navigate. We must equip our youth, and we were just talking about this, with the proper tools to navigate the ever-changing society we live in. Life is rough. And too many kids I encounter, too many adults I encounter are not prepared for it. So you have an excellent point. But that's our job. Our job, and we were having fun in the conversation, is to make sure we give them the tools to succeed, or at least to compete. Because it's not like back in the day, you graduate high school, get a job in the factory, get a job somewhere, work 20 years, you get a pension, you retire. Those days are gone. It's real competitive out there in the world. And I have kids who I'm talking to who can't sign their names, so you can't sign a job application. I have kids who are just not good in any subject, and I give out papers for them to write stuff down just to collect information. You'd be surprised how some of it is almost like illiterate, because they're not learning the proper skills. And it's not just the school's fault, it's our fault. We got to change our mentality. We got to make sure we actively involved in our child's education. We got to make sure they're getting the tools to be successful. Because even if your child goes to the best school, it doesn't mean they're going to be in the best class with the best teacher. And we live in a world now that's competitive. It's very competitive. I liken it to this. When I came out of high school, when I went for job interviews and stuff, there was nobody from Brazil, nobody from Spain, matter of fact, there was nobody from New Jersey, nobody from Delaware. It was all local. Now you put out a job application, you got people from all over the world, all over the country applying for these jobs. So our kids have to know. I'm not saying you got to go to college, but you need a skill. You need a skill. And that's our job. And we got to teach them how to navigate it. Are we talking to our kids about what a healthy relationship looks like? This is not a good relationship. It's bad. We're talking to our kids about work ethic. I find myself telling people all the time, if I don't go to work, I don't eat. It's a simple equation. But kids living at home don't get that equation because I don't have to go to work. Mom gonna meet my needs. But are we preparing them for the real world? Because my wife would tell you, I don't take care of grown people. My father told me that, and I passed it on down. Man, we don't take care of grown people. It's just not gonna happen. So we got to make sure that we teach them how to navigate the world. Not be so sensitive that every time somebody says something to them, they want to quit their job. Not be so sensitive to every time somebody critiques them, not criticize, critique to try to make them better, they start crying. Or they just shut down because the world is cruel. And they have to learn how to navigate it. Kids cut classes because their friends cut class. We got to teach our kids to be individuals and not do what everybody else is doing because everybody else is doing it. Those days are gone where, they had leadership classes and all this different stuff. They don't have it anymore. They just doing reading, writing, arithmetic is kind of it. And if you get a teacher who cares, it's a bonus. And then you got to understand, there's a lot of adults who don't know any better either. So we got to make sure, man, that we're telling them how to navigate. Why is it important to vote? We got to make sure we're telling our kids about that. And, we got to make sure our kids understand the importance of going to school, being in school on time, and being prepared. Because it prepares you for when you get out of school, when you go to work, you already have those habits. How to walk away from a situation is not good for them. Even if all your friends are in it, I know I don't need to be here. How do I walk away from that? So we got to teach them things. How to navigate a difficult, when you're in a difficult situation with an adult. And not be cursing out an adult and going through it with an adult. We got to teach our kids that. How do you navigate that? Challenge and difficulty are inevitable. And our youth will undoubtedly have to navigate through such times to be successful, and they will. They will. Life is just, we have pitfalls in life. It's just the way it is. I'm sure if everybody in this room, adults thought back, we have those times, man, that we thought was just tough and maybe never was going to end, or how do we get around it? We got to make sure we teach our kids that, my college coach used to say this all the time. No matter how bad you played today, the sun is going to rise tomorrow. That's never going to change. And every time the sun rises tomorrow, you got another opportunity to get this right. Now, it didn't necessarily make me feel better after a bad game, but it was right. He was right. He was right. Jesus, forgive. We must teach our youth to give back and be selfless and not selfish. We do. We have a lot of selfish young people, man. We got a lot of young people who think they're entitled. I've done nothing, but you owe me everything. You have to do this for me because you're my parent. We got a lot of kids. I hear they say it to me. I don't understand why my mom is not giving me $100 a week and, or she wants me to do chores. I hear it all the time. She should because that's my mom. That's my dad. No, you got to teach them, work ethic. You do chores, you get an allowance. You teach them that value. You teach them to give back. My kids, I do a lot of stuff in nonprofits. Been doing it forever. My kids give back. It is in their DNA. They volunteer for stuff. They do different things. We got to teach our kids to be selfless and not selfish. That's why we live in the world we live now, because everybody's looking out for themselves. And we teach our kids to do that. Look out for yourself. Look out for number one. We say stuff like that. As parents, I heard parents say this. I don't care about anybody else in this classroom. All I care about is my son. All I care about is my daughter. I've heard parents say that in front of the class. I'm sure you've heard people say similar stuff. I don't care about it. I just care about me or what's in my house. So we teach them to be selfish. And then we wonder why we got selfish people in the world who just look out for themselves. And my grandma used to always say, you can't receive anything with a closed hand. And easily evolving. We must understand that our kids are constantly evolving, and so are we. They're not the same at 13 that they were when they were 8. They're not the same at 16 when they were 13. They're constantly evolving. So what are we contributed to their evolution? What are we doing? Are we evolving with them, or are we still, the conversation we had, treat them like they're 12 when they're 16? Do we realize that even as adolescents, even though their body's growing physically, they're not mentally maturing as fast as their bodies are growing. So how are we working with them in that cycle? We got to make sure we understand that they're evolving, and we should be evolving. We need to be evolving too. We need to be growing. We need to be challenging ourselves to be better. And it's important that we do it, that we make sure we take time to invest and pay attention. When one becomes content, one settles for mediocrity, and I believe that. When somebody gets content for their station in life, and you don't want anything more than that, you settle for mediocrity. And you see it every day. People you work, they do, if I got to be at 8:30, I show up at 8:29 and 59 seconds. I get off at 4 o'clock, I'm sitting there at 3:59 and 59 seconds watching the clock, soon to take them out of here. I'm doing nothing more, nothing less. I don't care if I walk out in the middle of the job or whatever, I'm out of here. I'm not doing anything extra. Because we teach them that, man, and we teach them that mediocrity is okay. One of my least favorite lines is when I hear somebody say, at least I'm not as bad as so-and-so. Why would you take the worst person you can think of and compare yourself to? Why? We got to change the way we think. Compare yourself, not compare, I should say. Look at somebody that's being successful and figure out what can I do so I can be successful. Don't focus on somebody that's doing worse than you. We got to make sure that we're teaching our kids that, man, in every area of their lives. Mediocrity should not and must not be good enough for you or the next generation. When you settle for contentment, you settle for never being truly happy with yourself. I hear that from adults all the time. I wish I would have did this. I wish I would have did that. They're not miserable, but deep down inside it's like, man, if I did this, I may have had that. And we pass it on to our kids. Because we don't stretch ourselves, we don't pursue the stuff that we really want to pursue. We settle, and then we do the same thing to our kids. It's like having somebody work at a job for 20 years and complain for 20 years. But they don't look for a new job, they don't make job applications, they just complain. Because they settled and they think, this is my lot in life. And that's how they operate.